here's the thing, and this is not the thing that most people want to hear, but I just think it's worth talking about. Um, you can't actually control your horse. In a muscle match of, tug of war or who's stronger, who's, you know, yeah, bigger, stronger, faster, whatever, your horse will always win no matter what. And all we can really do is set our horses up either to motivate them or convince them that what we want them to do is the best option. Now, that feels maybe a little bit scary because, rightfully, as humans, where most of us are kind of control freaks, myself included, and we want things to be done exactly the way that we want them to be done at all times. And the scariest feeling on a horse is losing control. And I always tell my students, like, you are just as safe on a fast horse as a slow horse. The difference is whether or not you're in control. So you're in just as much danger losing control at a walk as you are at a full speed gallop. The difference is it's easier to lose control at a gallop because things are happening faster. But generally, the difference, the variable that really matters there is the control. So let's talk about control today. So I do think control itself is a very loaded word, because I think of control as like, kind of controlling, right? Or like using excessive force or kind of making somebody do something. And this can feel kind of icky. And I think that makes a lot of sense. However, the way that I think of control is more of a sense of like you are kind of the way that like maybe an athlete would think about control. Like we're balanced, we're moving together, we're working in unison, and that we have the same plan and that we're executing that same plan. So when we think about controlling our horses, like I said, like we can't really force our horse to do anything. So let's use a simple example. Let's say that we want to go have a really nice canter transition, right? So we're trotting around, we want to have a nice canter transition. We can't really control whether or not our horse picks up the canter when we say, or what kind of canter our horse picks up. They could, in theory, pick up a gallop or a crazy canter or a balanced canter, or they could just choose to not pick it up at all. They could pick up the wrong lead or the right lead. But what we can do is hone our communication to help inform our horse of what kind of canter we're wanting. And then based on our former track record and relationship with our horse, then hopefully, if things are going well, they pick up the kind of canter we ask for. And so what this really comes down to is our skill and finesse as a rider comes back to our ability to communicate with our horse about the kind of action that we want and to be able to then implement that with control in like an athletic sense, to be able to put our leg in the correct place, to be able to use the half halt at the right time, to have good balance and timing and rhythm and all of those things that go into a better communication and better aids to then ask our horse to do the right thing. Now, if our horse does the wrong thing, let's say that we do everything right and our horse still picks up the wrong lead, for example, we still can't really control that, right? They're the only one that actually has control over whether or not they pick up the correct lead. And so what we need to do in that case is maybe come back to the trot and try again. Maybe we asked the question wrong, or our horse didn't understand, almost always, right? Every now and then the horse decides like they're just lazy or they're just tired or maybe something hurts or they're stiff and they know what the correct answer is, but they don't give us that answer. And so then it comes down to motivation. How do we motivate our horse to give us the answer that we're wanting them to give us? And there are many ways to do that, right? So the sort of like old school, more traditional method of horse training would be to motivate them by punishing the wrong answer, right? So if they don't pick up the correct lead, we might either punish them by breaking them all the way back down to a halt and backing them up abruptly and then, adding extra spur and sending them forward quickly and making them feel like, oh, if I do the wrong answer, I'm going to get in trouble. And that's an option. It does work. I think it has some downsides. We'll leave it there for now. Another option would be to incentivize the correct answer. So that would be kind of our positive reinforcement based. We might give them a reward or even just release pressure when they pick up the correct lead, even if we have to ask several times, with the hope that then the next time the horse is going to be seeking out that reward and be kind of looking for the like benefit of picking up the correct lead because they know that they're going to get something out of it, basically. That also works, and I believe it also has some downsides. And again, we'll leave that for a longer video, another discussion, another time. But then the third option is something in between, and that's kind of this concept of making the wrong answer the harder answer, if that makes sense. So, and making the correct answer the easiest option. So if our horse picks up the wrong lead, we might try to hold that lead in a counter canter on a circle. And our horse is going to go, oh, that's not comfortable. I should probably just switch and pick up the correct lead because that wasn't right, right? Or if our horse doesn't pick up the canter, we're going to think, how could I make this transition into the canter easier and make maintaining the trot harder, right? And without getting our horse in trouble, without punishing the wrong answer, and also kind of giving them an intrinsic reason to pick up the correct lead rather than, kind of making them do it out of fear or, like fear of retribution or punishment or anything like that. That said, there's a lot of nuance here, and depending on what you're going through with your specific horse, there might be different approaches that are going to work better for different horses and different riders. So this is definitely something that's best to consult an experienced trainer that has aligned values with you on, that has dealt with horses with similar issues before, because there are a lot of different ways to manage this. But I think it's really helpful to kind of come back to this idea of, how do I make the answer that I want my horse to give me feel like the easiest option and the best option? And how do I make sure that they truly understand what it is that I'm asking? So another example is when you come down from a canter, a lot of times horses will pick up what I call the chaos trot, right? And so the chaos trot is when your horse is kind of trotting all over the place and it feels chaotic, right? And you're maybe bouncing and it's uncomfortable and it's unbalanced and you don't really feel like you have a lot of control, and maybe you don't really feel like you have good brakes. Or alternatively, the horse comes all the way down to like a full stop and they kind of like slam on the brakes in a jarring way, and that can also feel really uncomfortable. And so how do we do something in between where we can go from a nice canter or lope to a nice forward balanced trot that feels comfortable to ride, right? Without taking the chaos out of the whole situation. So one way we can incentivize our horse to pick up a nice balanced trot is to go right from that the canter to trot transition into a kind of small circle or a figure eight, because it's a lot harder to do a chaos trot on a small circle. And so our horse might go, oh, if I break down into a chaos trot, it's going to be a lot harder for me. And so it's probably going to be better for me if going forward, I just go from lope to a really balanced trot, because then I'm set up for whatever my person might ask for next. Does that make sense? So we're kind of giving them this idea that like, it's going to benefit them to come down in a balanced way so that they're able to be prepared for whatever we might need or want from them following that transition. So that's one option. And there are many, many ways to do that, but that's one that I've found to be really helpful, because it kind of makes the horse think and makes them choose the right decision on their own and makes them feel like it's their idea. And now this, if we think about humans, feels maybe a little bit manipulative, right? Like if we did this with a person, like if you're in a relationship with another person and you have an idea, but you know that if you suggest it, they're going to say no, and you kind of make them think it's their idea, that is like the definition of manipulative, right? And that's probably not the best option when you're working with another human. The difference is we are not working with another human. We are working with a horse, and they don't perceive manipulation the way that we do, right? So their prefrontal cortex is about as developed as a 3-year-old human. So if you think about any toddlers in your life, you know that they don't have a ton of ability to plan or to, they don't really understand the difference between fairy tale and reality, or between lies and truth. That's not really a concept that their brains can understand. And so when an adult human does that to us, we think, they have an ulterior motive, or they're hyper controlling, or they're a bad person, or whatever else. But when we do that to our horses, they don't perceive it that way. They just think kind of as matter of fact and objectively about it as possible. And so they're just perceiving, oh, when I break down from the lope, they might ask me for something right away, and so it's better if I just trot. And we're like, oh, what a great idea. I'm so glad you thought of that. And that actually strengthens our relationship. So that's something to kind of have in the back of your mind, that horses think a little bit differently than we do in that way. Now, what's interesting about horses is while their prefrontal cortex is not as developed as ours, their emotional centers are actually more developed. And so they have an amazing ability to empathize and to co-regulate with others around them that we just don't have. And I think honestly, we probably have more of it than we think we do, but generally, like, they're a lot more attuned to this than we are. And so our horses are generally pretty intrinsically motivated to give us what we're asking for if they understand it, because it strengthens our bond and it strengthens our co-regulation and it helps them to trust us and to respect us more. And so a lot of times when horses aren't giving us what we want, we as humans with our prefrontal cortexes that like to make up stories and tell, lies and all of these things, right? Our prefrontal cortex will tell us that our horse is doing this because they're trying to get out of something, or because they resent us, or because they planned to do this to ruin our life, right? And we have these big, grand stories. But for our horses, the vast majority of the time when our horse is not doing what we're asking of them, it's either because they don't understand what we want or because something else feels like a stronger pull or motivation. So a great example of this is the horse that stops to eat grass every 2 minutes, right? They're not doing it to make your life hard. They're not trying to get out of anything. They're not trying to drag you around. It's not personal to them. They just see an opportunity to eat grass, and that pull of the grass is more appealing to them than the desire to stay next to you and walk close. So how do we change that? How do we make the grass seem less appealing, which is gonna be really hard to do, and I don't actually know that it's possible, or make you seem more appealing? And so one option we could do is like this kind of what I think of as like asking questions, right? So as you're walking your horse, if they start getting distracted and thinking about grass and trying to pull you around, we don't have time for that. We are too busy. We have too much to do today. And so put them to work, have them lunge around you, or have them stop and back, or have them yield their hindquarters. Do something to make them think, and do it with not anything harsh or intense or intimidating, but maybe just a little bit of oomph to let them know that what you're doing is important, and that but there's no time or room for them to stop and dawdle and eat grass because we have an important job right now. And that, even just holding yourself with that air of importance and giving them a task to think about, again, is going to put them in a position where they're going to go, I don't have time to eat grass because my person might ask something of me, and I value that relationship and I trust my person, and if they ask me to do something, I'm going to do it right away. So those are all some different things to think about. And if you have any other questions or thoughts about this, please let me know, because I think this is a great conversation. We could go so many different directions from here, but I just wanted to leave it there for right now. And until next time, make sure to hug your horse for me.